Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Our guest today is a Toxic Angelz suit stylist, health, fitness, and posing coach, and she has a degree in business administration. She recently quit her 9-to-5 job back in 2022 to go all in with competing, coaching, and growing her online presence. And she earned her pro card in 2023 and received a top 10 placing in her pro debut. She also co-hosts Bikini Talks podcast, which is where we actually connected recently. And I'm really excited to welcome to the show, Sammy Jo. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm happy to have you on my platform now.
Yeah, super exciting.
Well, thank you. So I like to start every episode by asking if there's anything you do or think about, or maybe a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage.
Yeah, I feel like I try to communicate with as many women backstage as possible to grow friendships, and I feel like that's what helps me calm my nerves, as opposed to like being in my head, standing there, comparing myself to everybody and just being like overwhelmed with like the feeling of going on stage in general. I grew up doing competitive dance, so being on stage isn't something that I'm like foreign to. So I think just being backstage and talking to as many women and just making those connections is definitely the number one thing that I strive to do before I get on stage, just to kind of rid my mind of any overthinking, because I'm a chronic overthinker. And then also just making those friendships, because I know that, I plan on doing this for as long as I possibly can. So I want to build those connections, build those friendships. And it's always just nice to have someone to talk to backstage, because the ladies or the people in general that you're backstage with just went through the same exact thing you're going through. So it's like no one understands better than them. You know what I mean? So it's always nice to make those connections.
Absolutely. I feel like the best place for people to go if they want to hear, oh my gosh, me too, as a competitor, is at shows or at events and seminars, because generally in day-to-day life, you're not surrounded by other people who get it and who maybe respect isn't the word, but also embody it in the way you will backstage.
100%.
So that's great that you actually prioritize the friendship building. And when I hear you say, I want to do this as long as I can, it makes me think, you're still fresh, I guess you could say, the sport, although you've had a lot of experience on stage. You said yourself when we spoke last that you still consider yourself fresh. So I wanted your perspective on some things, and we'll probably dive into a decent amount of that. But what is something you wish you knew before you started competing?
That's a great question. I wish I knew, or I wish I took my growth more serious. Okay. So I started competing just because I was like, I want to step on stage once and say I did it. And I did it, and I loved it and haven't stopped since. But I didn't realize how, I guess I didn't know a lot about it. I had no knowledge. I saw women competing, but I never did my research in depth, because I was like, oh, I'm just going to do it once. I don't need to know, much about it. Obviously, I have a great coach, and, he's guided me through everything. I have a great support system. My husband's been in the industry for 10 plus years. So they have the knowledge, but I didn't have the knowledge myself. So when I started, I was like, wow, I've got a long ways to go. And I'm grateful for the 5 years I had in the gym before competing, because it got me to where I'm at now. But now I'm like, okay, wow, I need to put significantly more size on. So I had a great first, year and a half. And now I'm like, okay, now I have to put more work in. So like the first 5 years of being in the gym, I basically have to do that like over again and then
Yes.
build up and put on more size. So I guess I wish I knew more about the longevity of this sport than just the quick gratification of doing a show, placing high, and then where do I go next? You know what I mean?
Oh, I do know what you mean. That is literally like every time I tell someone about competing and they're new, I'm like, the thing I wish I did was grow before I even went into the sport. Because I think that when you don't, you will eventually have to grow. So I'd
Yeah.
rather have invested the time up front. Now, granted, me and you, we've learned from those experiences, of course, but I think that saying that, hey, I wish I would have taken this more seriously speaks volumes, because even though you still had a very successful season, it's not often we hear someone who's had a lot of great success right off the bat actually say and acknowledge that that still would have been beneficial. And especially because you started with just, hey, let's see what happens. I want to step on stage and do it once and be done, but you ended up really loving it. So now I'm wondering what makes you continue to pursue competing.
Yeah, I think just the gratification that I've received, like personal, like not
Yep.
not the outside compliments, not the outside, feedback, but like more so for myself. Because so like I said, I competed, I did dance competitions, I danced, my whole life. And that was always a group activity. And so everything I've ever done was always a group effort. So like if we won an award, it was as a group. If we accomplished something, it was as a group. But I've never done anything myself. And also, I'm a big people pleaser. So I always put people first. And I have my whole life until probably recently in the last few years. And obviously, there's still some people that I put first in my life, after myself now. But being able to accomplish this on my own, like, yeah, I'm guided by my coach and I have a support system, but like, no one's lifting the weights but me. No one's eating the food but me. No one's stepping on stage but me. So, like, just that gratification and just like self reflection on it of like, I did this, I achieved this, and no one else did the work but me. That's kind of what keeps me going and keeps me wanting to continue in the sport, because it's just so rewarding knowing that no one got you to where you are but you.
That's awesome. I can tell you've thought about that a lot and that that really drives you, because clearly it's rewarding for you internally. And I think coming from an athletic background, especially if it's a team sport, you do get so used to it being a team effort. And that doesn't mean you're not putting in your work. I'm sure as a competitive dancer, you're probably performing solos and learning your own choreography.
Mhm.
However, you transition to an individual sport and suddenly it's like, at least for me, I remember leaving volleyball and I was like, kind of like finally something where I get to see what is the
Yes.
result of my
What
own.
I'm capable of doing on my own.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, I know I obvious like you led the team. You made an impact. You performed well enough for your team to succeed, but there's something about you, it's in your hands as far
Yeah.
as the work goes. Obviously, you step on stage and that's whatever happens, happens. But
Yeah.
what you
But you're
do
the one
every
that showed up and did it. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. So that resonates a lot with me. And I think having that personal gratification is so key for longevity, because it's very easy to get distracted in this sport by
Mhm.
external gratification instead of seeing the real true reward is in the process. It's in what you're doing. So now, how did you actually approach your first season with the initial mindset of, I just want to see how it goes, step on stage once, to now how you approach it with the longevity in mind?
I think there's a lot more intent in what I do now and more of like trying to enjoy the process. Whereas the first time around, I was also still working my 9 to 5. So I was working my 9 to 5. I have my family. So I was like, kind of figuring it all out and just getting it done.
Yep.
And like I would document it here and there because, that's just like naturally what I did. But now I do things with so much more intent. And I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? Okay. Am I happy about this? Is there something about this that I'm like iffy about. If so, why? And then, figuring it out. But I just feel like now that I'm in it for the long game, there's so much more intent and purpose in it, as opposed to like, okay, I'm just going to do this to say I did it and then just like get it over with. So now it's more calculated for sure.
Such a great point. When you do go into it with like, let me just do this, you do kind of have a get through and get over it process
Hmm.
behind it. I didn't really think of it like that, but that's so true. And then you end up, I think, sometimes not leaving the sport, but leaving your prep. And that mentality wasn't enough to sustain what's required post show.
Hmm.
And then oftentimes we run into some of those concerns or those struggles post show where it's like, well, what is next? What am I doing? Especially for the person who doesn't end up continuing, it can be now a hard transition to what they used to consider normal now looks different because they changed their lifestyle in some way. And I'm sure as a coach, you probably have to guide people through that often, whether it's a lifestyle client or competition coaching, but you're dealing with people who are in this consistent and constant evolution, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's too like understanding. And that's where, like, when it comes to clients, it's like helping them understand what their long term goal is. They're like, I want these results right now. And I'm like, yes, that's great. And I really want to see you change and I really want to see you grow. But there's areas that we need to grow first and kind of become consistent in before we can get to this big picture. And there should always be a big picture. So when we get to that big picture, there's going to be a big picture after that too. And that's why, like, looking back on my first prep, I'm like, wow, I wish I actually like took a moment to step back to like document it. Even like just the smallest of things. Like I feel like, yeah, I can go back and I can see photos and I can see this and that, but it's like I never really got my thoughts. Like I can think back to what I was, thinking in that moment, but like if you look back on my YouTube channel now, it's like I have vlogs of like, hey, I'm 4 weeks out, or hey, I'm traveling and I'm so excited. And I'm like, wow, I can actually watch that and recall what I was actually feeling, as opposed to my first, which is like, no, I don't want to say monumental. I feel like that's kind of dramatic, but like a first prep, like
It
that's
is.
crazy. It's a lot. Especially to be where I'm at now, my mindset now to my mindset then, like I totally wish I had those vlogs or, that style video to just be like, okay, wow, like that's what I was thinking. Like it's so crazy to see how, like you said, the evolution of it.
Right. And you can't tell yourself that in the moment. Like you can't tell your past self, oh, that this is who you'll
Yeah.
become. You just can't. And so it is nice when you have documented it to look back and be like, okay, I actually see how this changed with me and with the process. Sometimes I'm like, thank goodness I didn't put as much out because I would be causing all sorts of problems because I
Yeah.
was a problem. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
the same time it's interesting because and that's I'm gonna just say like a random statement here, but you know how there's like cancel culture and stuff.
Hmm.
I think it's kind of inconsiderate of how much people grow and learn in their life and their journey, especially with the fitness industry more specifically.
Yeah.
Things change, come out with new research or new approaches. And I think having grace for ourselves from those past experiences is important, but it would be nice if those things were documented because then you can be like, oh, wow, I see why this happened when I was thinking in this way. And you could show your clients too, like, I once was
Yeah,
thinking
I
that I
started
wanted
here
this.
too. Yeah. And two,
Exactly.
like it also just like allows you to look back and reflect on your journey. And like you said, you allow yourself to you give yourself grace, right? You're like, okay, I had that mindset now, and now I have this mindset. Okay, what did I do to change my mindset? So now when you're, coaching people, you're like, okay, I can actually walk them step by step through what this process is, right? What this process to get them to this mindset. Because, you choose I feel like a lot of people choose their coaches and things like that off inspiration, right? Someone who they resonate with. So it's like, okay, if I can connect with you because I've been through this before and I can reflect on how I got to where I'm at now, I can step by step walk you through this process and make it easier for you because I had to navigate it myself, which like I would rather go through it trials and tribulations so that someone else doesn't have to go through those same things.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that speaks to the business side of this industry too. That's really important is it's the business of people and relationships and connections. And when you can relate to people, speak to their emotions, speak to what maybe they're thinking about too, you're more likely to touch them in a way that you can't touch through maybe a simple marketing tactic because it's really so much deeper than that. And to have a coach or have a mentor who you can really say, hey, they not just understand it from maybe an educational perspective, but also from an experience perspective or from something else they endured in their life, even if it's not fitness related, they're able to apply it here. And I think we connect more. I had a mentor way back in the day, and he used to say that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that is kind of what the messages you're sharing here of like, you've taken yourself through this journey and you can walk with clients on theirs that same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And two, it's like being in the fitness industry or being in this industry for so long, like it comes second nature to us. But like thinking back to like how difficult it was to transition, like it's a big leap. So like not only is it an emotional journey, but like it could be scary for some people, like completely changing their life, like 180. It can be overwhelming. So to have that guidance and someone like you were saying to connect on an emotional level and show that they care is definitely super important.
Great point. It is a transition in your life and who you are, and that comes with other people's involvement or their changes of you or I should say their change in their view of you. Now, I think competing is a great outlet that we see for so many people. And I've interviewed many who do posing coaching. They were also previous dancers like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very kind of interesting thing to me because most females growing up end up having some sort of disordered eating or body image dissatisfaction, that the likelihood of that increases when you're also an elite athlete of some sort. And then you add on, or you're in sports as a kid and specifically female sports. And then you add on top of that, like having been a dancer, what I've seen and what I've learned is a lot of the times dancers have a tendency towards like a perfectionist mentality and the desire to present themselves in a very particular way. And they're coached to do this and they're guided to do this. So I'm curious if you see that show up in your life as a competitor or if competing more so just helped you maybe utilize that energy in a different way.
Yeah, I will say I was very grateful. So the studio that I grew up dancing with, while we were a competitive studio, we didn't have that. And I don't want to use negativity as the word, but that like negative connotation against presentation. So like the owner of the studio, her daughter was a dancer. So I was super close with them. So she had that motherly instinct more than like a strict, like, you need to look like this, you need to present this way. Obviously, like if we're getting on stage, there's a certain expectation of presentation, but it was never body image related, which I was super like looking back on it and like realizing how prominent that is nowadays or just in general. I'm super grateful for the studio that I was with and the mentors that I had during that time because it was never, it was about, consistency and showing up and being, meticulous and precise in what you were doing, but it was never in the body image aspect of it. So I think I'm definitely grateful looking back. And I think this conversation's like, I don't want to use the word like triggering it, but prompting that thought. Like I never put that into perspective until now. So I definitely am super grateful that it was never in like a negative connotation.
That is amazing. I'm really glad to hear that too. And I think we need a lot more of that, not just for dancers, obviously, for all female sports. And I think that knowing you had that experience, I imagine molded parts of how you are now. Even you used words like diligence and discipline and showing up and doing what you need to do for the criteria of course, that competition. And then I'll look at competing, like, sure, you don't necessarily need to look perfection, right? That's not possible to achieve, but you should probably brush your hair before you get on stage, right? So, and that's just a silly example, but it's creating that mindset of this is for a purpose versus this is because I will be looked down upon if I don't, or I will be less valuable if I don't. So how do you see competing from a both competitive perspective, like what you need to bring to the stage, as well as from a personal growth perspective?
Yeah, I think because the sport is so subjective, like there's a standard, right? But it's more subjective, like your physique is different than my physique. So it's more so, and like no one knows what you went through during your prep. So I would say it's definitely, I feel like while yes, it's rewarding to step on stage and have that perfectionist mindset of like, I brought the best package. But I really think, like, in the grand scheme of it, competing is more of like a mindset challenge than anything. Because it's like having the ability to step on stage, having the ability to put the dedication in for that 12 weeks or more, and continuing, if you're doing multiple shows back to back, I would say it's more of like a mindset challenge than a competition against the people that you're next to, because again, it's a long game. You can go to one show and get first place, and you can go to the next show and get sixth.
Yep.
So it's really about who shows up. So I feel like that's where it's funny, because I hear so many people, they're like, I'm so competitive, I'm so competitive. And it's like, yeah, I'm competitive to a degree, but it's more about like, I had to put that out. So it's like, yes, I want to have a really great physique, and I want to step on stage and be very confident in the way that I look. But am I better? Am I a better person than I was the last show, mentally and physically? Right. I want to, beat the last package that I had, but mentally, have I grown? If I haven't grown mentally, then this isn't benefiting me. Like, if what I'm doing is not challenging me to be a better person in different aspects, then this isn't for me. This isn't what I should be doing. Obviously, I want to improve my physique, but I also want to improve my mindset too. So I think people who just see it as a competition, but don't think of it as like a mental or like growth opportunity, has like, should reconsider their outlook on it. I guess
Yeah.
in the nicest way possible.
Yeah. I thought, wow, you explained that really eloquently. I know that was a really like, um, maybe kind of random in my mind. It was a random question because I didn't plan to ask you that, but I'm really glad that I did. And most of the times I don't plan to ask the questions I do, but that one in particular, I was like, I don't even know why I'm asking, but now I realize because you gave such an awesome answer. And that was something I think a lot of people, need to hear, and how you've personally been able to utilize that for your own growth. And of course, you said you put the competitive side of you aside, and it was really about being better every time. And maybe this will naturally answer this question, but you had that successful start. You went from 10th place at your first national show to second, and then to first, and winning your pro card. So, and then you had a very successful pro debut. So what do you feel contributed to that increase of success in placings?
Say goodbye to the post-show blues and make peace with food and your body through the 7-day coaching series that is built to support you in embracing your improvement season. This is a free coaching series that I have put together to support you in eating without guilt or judgment, knowing how your relationship with food, yourself, exercise, and your body reflects in other areas of your life. Really get clear on your prep identity versus off-season identity, and finding balance after a competition, as well as improving your body image. Plus, there's even a bonus training for those of you who do enroll, and this is going to change the way that you feel in your improvement season, change the way you feel about yourself, food, and your body. If you want access to this, you can get instant access to the trainings right now by visiting www.celestial.fit/post-show.
My mindset towards the sport. So in 2022, I competed for the first time in March. I got married in June, and I didn't reverse properly. I didn't take it serious, and I Like I still hadn't committed to the sport. I was focused on getting married, whatever. I did that. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like I've still been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it. It's been on my mind. I didn't take that off season serious. I did. And then I decided to do, since I qualified for nationals at my first show, I did the national show in December of that year, 2022. And I placed 10th and I was like, okay, you know, that's a great placing for my first national show. I'll take it. I saw how committed other women were to the sport and it motivated me. I was like, you know what? Like I have the mindset for this first and foremost. I have, you know, the foundation for this. Why am I not taking it serious? Why? Like I have the ability mentally and physically and genetically to, you know, make this into something. So why haven't I been taking it serious? And then that's when the switch kind of flipped and I'm like, okay, I'm making this a thing for me. I'm making this a priority. I'm making this growth mentally and physically a priority for myself. So from December to, I think it was like April, I started prep. I was like, this is it. Like I was 100% serious. I was all in. I was taking it serious in the gym and nutrition and things like that. And I was like, I want to be successful in this. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to be successful. So I think when I had that mind shift switch, that's when I knew that I was like, okay, I can do this. And then that's when I went to junior nats and I placed second. I went to Universe and I got first. And I got my pro card and I just went in with this mindset of I'm going to turn pro. Like nothing came across me that could change my mind. Like I was just so dead set on it that not getting my pro card that year was not even an option.
Wow. That is a really great example actually too of how comparison can be helpful. Because it wasn't, oh, I'm not good enough because these women are doing it and I'm not. It was those women are doing it. I see myself in them. I see what attributes or skills or characteristics are allowing them to obtain that success. And I can harness that from myself to generate that. And you made it your mission to go out and prove that to yourself. And you earned your pro card, which is awesome. And that was because you had that seed planted in you already that I can do this, but it took you seeing, hey, I'm maybe not fulfilling my fullest potential, and not in the way of like, I have no proof that I have this potential, but in a way of like, I already know I can do it. And then you utilize that to actually create that as a reality for you.
Yeah. It's like using it as fuel as opposed to a discouraging. And that's where the mindset shift is too. Like, and I feel like that's at that point is when I started to kind of shift from that people pleaser mentality to like focusing on myself. And like, obviously while keeping family and friends, you know, at a close distance, but like, instead of having friendships, you know, put in the forefront and then putting myself on the back burner, that's kind of where I had that mentality switch. And I was like, I can do this for me. Like I'm using this as fuel to the fire, as motivation, as opposed to just being like, yeah, they look better. They're probably going to get their pro card before me. And like, if they did, great. I'm sure they put in just as much work, but instead of like putting myself down, I used it as the motivation of like, if they can do it, why can't I do it? You know?
Yes, absolutely. And that's interesting. You went from being more of a people pleaser to more so putting yourself first. And you mentioned that earlier too, that there are, of course, you prioritize your relationships, but you really made it a point to put yourself first. Was there something that happened within your life or yourself that made you go, wow, like if I don't do this, it's potentially going to cost me?
Yeah, so crazy like little backstory of my life. So I'm originally from Philadelphia. I currently live in California. In 2018, I met my husband and he lives here in California. And at the time, you know, I had just finished college. I was living with my parents. My friend group was like my life, you know, more so because everything they did, I put first and I just, you know, followed suit. So that was just kind of the way my life was, right? I did everything on other people's times. If they needed something, I literally dropped what I did and I went and helped them. Or if they're like, hey, let's hang out. If I had a plan for myself, I would literally cancel my plan that I had set for me and I would go hang out with other people. Like, not cancel on someone else to hang out with someone else, but
Right.
like if I had, something for myself that I wanted to do. And then moving to California, when that topic came up with my friend group, they were beside themselves. Like they weren't supportive. They weren't happy for me that I had found someone that I wanted to, potentially spend the rest of my life with. Like I have one friend to this day that I still talk to that I met in college. We're best friends. Like nothing could happen that would probably separate us. But that friend group that I had from high school, like there was just no support whatsoever in the move, in anything like that. And then I still did it. I moved. I was like, you know what? I'm doing this for me and I'm happy, like genuinely happy. And I'm going to do something for myself. So I moved and it was the best decision I had ever made. I moved from a small town to California and I had nobody here, nobody but my husband. And it was like probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, but it has been the best thing ever. And I lost those friends because of it. And I think from that moment, and my husband being one of the biggest like advocates for me putting myself first, he's like, hey, I love that you take care of us. And he has a son. So he's like, I love that you take care of us. He's like, I love that you help, you took on this motherly role. He's like, but I want you to put yourself first. Like, what does Sammy like to do? Like what he would ask me, like what my hobbies are. And I couldn't even answer that question because I never thought about it. I never gave myself time to have a hobby because it was always what everybody else wanted to do. So he's like, what do you like? What do you want to do? So like, he has been definitely one of the biggest advocates for helping me through that transition and figuring out like what it is. But yeah, that was definitely like the pivotal point in my life that I was like, you know what? Not again. Never again.
Man, I just learned so much about you. Like I started before we hit record, you guys, I told Sammy, I'm like, I didn't realize how much depth there was, like, because we didn't ever connect really before. And then when we did, I was like, I'm going to look into her life more. And now I'm learning even more. And I just think this is so awesome. Like I'm excited as I'm talking to you and my head's kind of going in a few different directions. I'll start with validating the fact that leaving a friend group who only supports you when you're doing what they want to do and what they maybe have control over in your own life and spirit is a huge, courageous thing to do. And as obvious as it can seem when you tell the story back that, hey, that's probably not the best circle of friends to keep, in the moment, that's a very difficult thing to do, especially when you're a people pleaser and you want to identify as someone who will drop anything for their friends and do whatever you need to do to maintain that. And maybe, at least from my experience, sometimes there can be that fear of abandonment, fear of letting others down, fear of, oh, what's going to happen if I don't do this, right? So to leave and put yourself in that vulnerable position where now you're in California, you only have your husband, and starting over and learning, well, who am I without them? And who am I with one supportive friend? Thank you to that supportive friend.
Mm-hmm.
And how can I build upon that? And then you said this kind of transpired when you got married, or maybe you guys were still dating, but you moved and you adopted this motherly role as well. What was that transition like for you? And did you feel that that kind of quickly became your focus?
Yeah. So growing up, I have an older sister. She's 6 years older than me. She has 2 kids, both boys. So that was something that kind of came second nature to me. Like since I can remember the concept of having a child, I've wanted a child. And like still to this day, I want my own kids, and hopefully that happens very soon here. But my sister, went to nursing school and her husband was a police officer. So their schedules were insane. So I would say when my nephews were at a very young age, like my parents and I helped raise them. So I was, well, I guess I was in high school. Yeah, so like in high school and throughout college, like I was helping raise two young boys. Like I would take them to school, I would pick them up from school, I would take them to sports. Like I was already doing that and like loving it. It was the best thing ever. Like they were my best friends at the time. Like they were my whole life. And they still are, don't get me wrong. Thankfully they actually moved out to California. So we have them here. Yeah. And one of them is a year older than my son, and one of them is a year younger than my son. So, like, same age, same everything. So, I feel like adopting or taking on that motherly role was like a second nature thing to me. Obviously, it's different when you can't drop the child off and, give them back to their parents. So, it's more of like a 24/7 thing now. But it was definitely a super easy transition and something that I was like super willing to do. And it's funny only because I brought it up in the like whatever, the friend group couldn't conceptualize that. Like they couldn't fathom the idea of, I can't believe you're going to be with someone who has a kid. And that is what sparked the biggest conflict. And I think it was just a deflection point because they had nothing else to grasp on as like, why would you move out there? Right. Like I had the support that I needed. Like, granted, obviously my parents weren't happy about it, but like they supported me. My sister didn't love the fact that I was leaving, but she supported me. So it's like they had nothing else to really grasp on because the situation couldn't have been more perfect, right? Like I had a job moving out here. I had a place to live. Like I had stability. So there was never a point where there was any like rocky, like, oh my gosh, what if? Obviously there's always what ifs, but nothing that was alarming. So like that was the only thing that they could grasp on. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like I've been doing this for the last X amount of years with my nephew. So it's like, why wouldn't I? Like, and if you actually knew me as a person, you would know that I want nothing more in life to be a mother. So it's like,
Yes.
of course I'm going to take this on. Like, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. So it's like, why? Like, it was just, again, when people only want you for your benefit, they don't really realize who you are as a person and what you actually want.
Oh my gosh. Like literally when you were telling that story, I was thinking, do these friends not know her? Like she is equipped. She is excited. Like this is something she wants. Why wouldn't they be like, oh my gosh, this could not be more perfect for you, Sam? Instead, it was like, let's find any potential cautionary tale we could tell her to keep her here. And it reminds me of the crab basket mentality. Like when there's a crab trying to get out of the basket, all the other crabs pull the crab down. You were the crab that got out of the basket and you were able to go and create this amazing life. How old is your son? And you said you want to have kids soon. So I'm curious to hear about your family building goals as well.
Yeah, so he's 12. He just turned 12 in November. And then he actually has an older sister as well who's 17. Or did she just turn 18? 17 or 18, regardless. So my husband raised her, so she calls him dad. So we don't see her as often, but so basically there's two of them. So she's 18, he's 12. And then, yeah, so I will say we're aiming within the next year. So it's kind of like up in the air. So I plan to compete like June or July. So it really depends on how my season goes for our plans to grow our family. So we don't have kids, together yet, but it's definitely talked about very, very frequently.
That is awesome. I also love that you call him your son. And I think it's amazing that you obviously must have a great bond with him. So how old was he when you met your husband, and how did that turn into like, okay, I'm ready. Like I want to join this family and be a part of it.
Yeah, so he was like 5 or 6 when we met. And then at the time, he was such a daddy's boy. So like whatever dad was into, he was into. And it's so funny how things work because like when I tell you like him and I are so similar, like we are the same person. So it like instantly we just clicked. Like we have so many similarities. Now we're like besties. Like he's like, oh, hey, did you see this? And I'm like, yeah, did you see this? And he's like, have you listened to this song yet? And I'm like, No, but that's really cool. Have you listened to this song yet? So like super fun in that sense. And then I got him into dance too. So he started taking like hip hop classes when I moved out here because that's, what I grew up doing. So there's just a lot of similarities between the two of us. So I think that connection from such a young age was just so easy to make because there was just so many things in common. And to the fact that I had already had experience, it wasn't like I was just coming in as like a 22-year-old, like, oh my gosh, there's a kid, what do I do? It was like second nature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great point. Like, because you already had that experience is a very, natural thing for you to take on. And I think your point too, that your family goals as well, like, is depending on your season. And I think so many women are in that position where it's like, I want to build my family, or I want to start thinking about that. Or maybe they just want to date, but they're like, my focus is on prep.
Yeah.
So how are you approaching this with that idea in mind that you want kids? And while I don't think there's necessarily a timeline for competing, I know sometimes we can't necessarily control the timeline of our body. So I'm curious, like, how you're approaching that.
Yeah, so I will say it's funny that you mentioned that because that's literally my thought process. Like my thought process is I can compete forever, but my body will, the older I get, the higher risk of complications. So I'm taking that more into consideration. And it's like, yes, competing is a big passion for me and a big career path for me, but being a mother has superseded this. I've been competing for 2 years. I've wanted to be a mom since I was like 8.
Right.
So I'm like, and I'm 27 now. So while yes, I know, like, obviously I'm very healthy. So having a child in my 30s wouldn't be an issue. It's like, I want to at least start now so that I can continue to have kids in my 30s so that I'm not waiting until I'm 30 to have kids. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just my mindset and how like I view my life and how I picture it for myself. And my husband's 36. So he's older as well. So I don't want to wait too long for his sake too. So not his sake, that sounds weird, but like,
Totally.
you know what I mean? So health purposes for me. So it's like for him to be 50 and, chasing a toddler around, like realistically, like that's not fair to him, but definitely thinking about myself in the situation too. So it's like, depending on how successful my season is this year, whether I stop competing or continue to try to get to Olympia is kind of like up in the air. So it's like Olympia or babies. It's going to be like how dependent on how my season goes. But I feel like there is part of me that is like, maybe regardless of where my placing is in my first few shows, like the urge to be a mom is strong, like strong, like so strong that I'm like, should I even compete this year? And I'm like, no, I owe that to myself. I haven't gone this long in an off season to just, I don't want to say throw it away, but like put it on the back burner. So I'm like, I'll at least do 1 to 2 shows, see how it goes, and then kind of reevaluate from there for sure.
That's so great. And I really love everything you just said. I can relate as far as like always wanting to be a mom. And then as you get older, your focus is more attuned to family if that's something that you do desire and want. And no, that's not true for everybody, but I'm speaking to you directly about how that's very much resonating with me. And I think about the same thing when it comes to competing. I'm like, okay, like if I were to put them on a scale of which is more important, like the family one will always, like that will not even be a battle. Like it's just gonna weigh it. But also we talked about earlier how much competing adds to your life and your development. So to be able to continue to do that now and then potentially post kids too, it's really awesome. And that's a beautiful thing about this. And we know from your past experience, when you set your mind to something, you've done a great job of getting it. So, how are you intending to meet your goal of getting to the Olympia, and why is that goal important to you?
I would say it's important to me because it's kind of the next step, right? So like getting my pro card was that one goal that I set for myself, and nothing could get in the way of it. And now it's like, while Olympia is a big goal, there is something that can get in the way of it. And that's more of like intentionally, right? Like I'm doing that to myself, as opposed to like, not going to Olympia because, XYZ. It's like I'm making that decision for myself. So I think just like I owe that to myself too. Like I know people, compete for years and years and years to get to the Olympia stage. So if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. But I owe it to myself to at least try, as opposed to just, settling. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, what was the other question? I'm sorry.
How you intend to get there was the question, I think. I'm like, what else did I have?
Like, wait, hold on.
Why it's important to you. But I guess that you answered that. So
I think you said, how do you intend to get there? Yeah. So I guess the thought process is like, obviously this off season, just coming back, taking the feedback that I got was just overall growth, right? So pretty standard, pretty achievable, right? So just kind of taking that information, putting my all into it, seeing where I stand, getting the feedback in the next, in my next prep season, and then kind of just working from there. So it's like, if it's something that's, if I go and they're like, hey, you need fuller glutes. Okay. That's something that I can work on. If they're like, hey, you still need more size. And I'm like, okay, well, if, the last 6 to 8 months wasn't enough, then maybe I just need more time. It's going to be a year or 2 years, whatever it is. So why not take that break, focus on family, grow my family. And then, maybe between having kids, pop into another show, get that feedback, see where I'm at. And then, obviously by then there's going to be new competitors in the industry. So industry standards might change. So like things are constantly changing. So keeping that in my mind as well, and just kind of not putting too much pressure on myself, because I know that growing a family is super important to me, and just kind of taking it as it comes.
Yeah, I love that. Getting the feedback and applying yourself and knowing what realistically does it look like to achieve that. I just went to a seminar yesterday in North Carolina that I spoke at. It was hosted by Lauren Adams. She's an IFBB Bikini Pro as well. And there were some judges there who I asked them what their biggest pet peeve was. And they said that it is when they give a competitor feedback and the competitor shows up 2 weeks later as though it was possible to achieve that feedback. And that feedback specifically is when it's to grow. And they were saying how, a lot of times a competitor will come back and they just look leaner and they think that makes them look bigger. And in some cases that's true, but in a lot of cases it then makes them too conditioned, or they don't fit the other points of criteria. Yeah. And so you make a great point that like, okay, yes, you can build on feedback as you did in your season to getting your pro card. But now the feedback being to grow, you needed to take that time away. And so now you're willing to go back and say, hey, was this enough? Do I still need more? And I think that drives success with a long-term view of the sport versus like that short-term gratification, as you mentioned earlier. But with that said, I was curious about your significant jump from nationals in 2022 to junior nationals 6 months later. What happened in that 6-month time frame? Because you had said you got married and then you got serious. So did you do any sort of growing season? Were you still lifting weights, or was it just time off and then April prep again?
Yeah, so we kind of knew going into nationals in December where my physique was at. Like we knew I didn't have a super competitive package, but it was more so just like, okay, we're as good as we can be right now without doing anything too extreme, because we definitely like to take a healthy approach to it because it's all about longevity. So it was like, okay, even before going to nationals, it was like, okay, what does this next 6 months look like? Like, what do we need? And then, the motivation from being at nationals was like the icing on the cake that I needed to just really push for it. So those 6 months were very intentional of growing and training principles and nutrition and things like that. to really just get me to where I needed to be for nationals, to bring a competitive package. And then even you made a great point in terms of feedback. And I feel like this is something that's not talked about enough. And I'm so glad you just brought it up, is the feedback. So like if your feedback is to grow, you can't do that in 2 weeks. And I experienced that in a sense between junior nats and USAs. So at junior nats, Sandy told me, she's like, you just need to be a tad leaner and you need a little bit more fullness in your upper glutes. And I had said to her, I said, do you think that's achievable by Universe? And she's like, absolutely. She's like, but please be very careful in the way you approach this, because I don't want you to go to Universe and be told that you're too lean. She's like, you are teetering on this fine line. So that's why I think it is so important for people to take that feedback and really absorb it for what it's worth. And it's like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like when you have that judge in front of you, ask them, do you think this is achievable by this time? And they will give you that answer. I don't think people utilize that availability as they should, because like you said, if your feedback is to grow, why are you gonna, not only because this is an expensive sport.
Yeah.
Like for one show, you're spending at least $1,000. So like if your feedback was to grow, why 2 weeks later are you going to spend another $1,000 when you haven't grown? Like when you haven't put the time in that you need based on the feedback that you were given. And like obviously if you've already paid for the show, that's a very different scenario. Like you almost have to show up.
Yeah, go.
But it's like if you're intentionally scheduling another show a month later, realistically, like why? Like take that step back, realize like, okay, I want to be in this long term. Like I want to succeed. So I'm going to take that feedback for what it is and actually act upon it. And that is taking that time off and having that intentional growth season. So I think I'm actually really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I love your expansion on it from your own personal experience and asking, like literally asking Sandy, well, is this something you're seeing in the near future, or is this something you expect more time away? Because I think that a judge, if it's the same judge, they're going to remember what they told you potentially, or they're going to, especially if you were in like a top call out, they're probably going to be like, oh, she's back. So I think it's important to really take it into consideration, like you said, but then also go to the drawing board and see like, is this realistic for me? And then you brought up finances too, which is so important. It's like, I look back on some of the shows I did and I'm like, I knew I shouldn't have done that one. That cost money. I should have stopped competing that year at this show, not continuing with 3 more shows. And you live and learn, but once you get to the national level, you're like, shoot, that's a lot of money. You're going and spending money on the hotel. If you don't get the host hotel soon enough, you're spending money on Ubers on top of a hotel or Lyft or a rental car. You're investing most likely to get your hair and makeup done by somebody else if you're not doing it yourself. Otherwise, if you are, maybe you've invested in how to do that. And then you get up there, but you're also investing in the actual class. And national classes cost more than regional. And I think this is also why it's so important to evaluate your life before you even enter a prep and see, like, is this something that's going to contribute to overall life peace and happiness, or is it going to take away?
Yeah. And two, it's like you're spending all this money. Like, are you going to regret spending the money? Like, are you going to resent the sport because now you're in debt? Like, that's also something you don't want to do. And it's like, and that's why I always say, like, the cost, the coach, and the experience, like, you don't want to resent any of that because it is such an amazing sport. There's so much gratitude and just great experiences and great people and great opportunities that you can have. But like, if you don't consider those 3 things, it can be a very resentful experience. And it's like, that's why it breaks my heart when I hear people having bad experiences for, either one of those reasons, because it's like, if you really take a step back to plan it properly and do the research, like, you can have an amazing experience and it can be very life-changing, like a growing opportunity. Like, just from A to Z. Like, it could be a really life-changing experience. And I hate how many people have such a negative connotation towards it because of, not doing the proper research or, things like that.
Yeah, so true. Just being able to dig into expectations that are realistic and have conversations with multiple people, not just the coach you're paying to
Yeah.
get you on stage, like, because they obviously will want you to continue to compete more often than not, unfortunately. But yeah, it's more than just talking to your coach about expectations, like talk to other people in the sport, because I
Mhm.
think other competitors will keep it very real about what that will look like. And going back to your journey, you had mentioned very early on in this episode that your first prep, you were working a 9 to 5 job, and then you decided, okay, I'm going to quit and go headfirst into competing, coaching, and content creation. So, what called you to do that, especially after you had gotten your business administration degree?
Yeah, so I think at the time, so I had been contemplating leaving my 9 to 5 for a while. Um, I was in just a very male dominated industry, and I definitely will say that there were times where I let my emotions get the best of me, and that's kind of what pushed me to make that decision because I was utilizing my degree. I was learning, like, it was a smaller company, a small location on a big scale, so I was learning A to Z. I did office administration, I did operations, logistics, sales. I did everything and I learned a lot, and I think that job gave me a lot of foundation to be able to achieve the things that I've achieved. But um when I started competing, I realized like how passionate I was about competing, and then also like being in the industry for as long as I have been. Like, I always had this mindset of wanting to help others, but very early in, my journey, I had a lot of self-doubt of like how many coaches are in the fitness industry. Like, if I did it too, I'm just another person. You know what I mean? Like, I would always say like that. I would always tell my husband, the industry is so saturated with trainers. And he's like, because you're in the industry, that's all you see. He's like, but we are one small niche in this humongous world of people who want to make that change. So he was definitely, a big factor in helping me open my eyes to like the potential that I had to grow that business. And it really, like, it kind of, everything kind of ties in, right? So like content creating, training, posing, being a coach, helping people in general, all ties into business administration, or just having a general business degree. So making that transition was easy in the sense of like, okay, I have the fundamentals of how to run a business, how to grow a business, marketing tactics, sales, things like that. So it's like, why am I spending my time working for somebody else when I can be doing this on my terms? I can be doing what I want. I don't have to be told what to do by somebody else. I can be selling a product, or a service, not a product, but I can be selling a service that I'm passionate about, as opposed to selling toilets and water heaters. Like, you know what I mean? So I was in the plumbing industry. So I was selling things that it was funny because my sales manager kept saying like, he was trying to teach me things and I just like wasn't grasping it. And I would always tell my husband, I'm like, yeah, like I know about it, but like, eh. And he's like, why aren't you retaining it? And I'm like, I don't care about it. Like, I don't care about pipe. I don't care about water heaters. I don't care about toilets. It doesn't interest me. I don't care about it. Like, don't get me wrong. That job was great. Foundationally, like, and structurally, it gave me so much information, and it helped me learn a lot about myself, but I just didn't care about it. Like, I didn't care about the things that I was doing. Whereas like competing and training and coaching, like, I'm passionate about helping people change their lives. Like, I am passionate about changing my own life. I'm passionate about teaching women how to be confident on stage. Like, that is what lights my fire. So it's like, I'm going to put more energy into that because it's what I want.
Totally. Yeah, I understand how that goes. When I first started college, I was studying dietetics, and I did that for a decent amount of time. And I realized like I wasn't interested in it. Like, it wasn't, I wasn't like, yeah, I can't wait to learn more, and my mind kept gravitating towards anytime I took like a psychology class, a wellness development class, anything related to human development or mentality or philosophy, like I couldn't get my hands off of it. I was spending my free time reading more, looking up research. I was enjoying those discussions and I would write these huge long essays and reports that I would be told it's too long. You don't need all this. I'm like, but it was so interesting to me.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, I got to switch my degree. And so when you say it's like passion drives you, it's true. I think you're more inclined to not just learn, but also retain, as you mentioned, that information when you can see something useful and exciting and fulfilling in your mind to apply it. And I think it takes a lot of courage to leap. And I think your husband made a great point. It seems saturated because we're in it, right? Like he said, I love that. It's such a great point and likely encouraging for other people considering it. But I do know when you're heavily reliant on business or traction online, there's always that feeling, at least I experience this of, well, what if something happens with social media or a change in presence or God forbid, you lose an account or something change and those types of things can be very scary for an online business owner and and we don't have to get into all this, but why it's important to have a direction or a funnel people go outside of social media so you can maintain contact. But have you had well, actually, I'll just ask you first about the experience I know you had with YouTube demonetizing your channel. I mean, I think there's a lot of YouTubers who heavily rely on that income from the monetization of their channel. How did that impact you and at a time when you're trying to grow your business as well?
Yeah. So the reasoning, so starting my YouTube channel, I initially started doing like hauls and reviews. So I loved the idea because I always felt that there wasn't enough information for myself. Like if I had transitioned from like forget the mall, I never want to step foot in there again, to like I strictly just want to online shop. It's convenient, it's fast, it's quick, but there was never enough information. Like I could click size guide and I had no clue what I was looking at. Like, yeah, I know what a 24-inch waist, like I know how to measure that, but like, is it accurate? I would buy jeans from one store that were a size 4, and I'd buy jeans from another store that were a size 4 based on the measurements, and I would hold them up and they'd be completely 2 different sizes. So I had initially started the channel to, do more hauls and reviews and to inform people, to educate them, and then to inform them on brands that they've never heard of, right? So it's like if I found a great company, like I don't gatekeep. I want to tell everybody and I want everybody to know about it. And I want everybody to experience the same great experience I experienced. So it's like I was genuinely doing it for a good purpose. And then, so I was doing hauls and reviews. I would do bikini reviews as well. Like I live in Southern California. Why wouldn't I? Because, we're always at the beach or we're paddleboarding or we're doing something active. And it's like, I know how many people live in Southern California. Like they probably want to know about these companies too. Especially at the time, like Shein was really big. So it's like, okay, so many people have issues with them. So like they were a big company that I would do reviews for. And then I started dabbling into lingerie reviews. And I felt like that went hand in hand in the fitness industry because it was taboo. Like it was a taboo thing that no one talked about. And as I was like growing as a person, I started to like dive into that side of my life as well, being more comfortable sharing those things because it's like, while it was kind of talked about when we were kids, like it was almost like a hush hush thing. Like if we had an issue or we had a question, we always knew that we could ask our parents or ask an aunt or a cousin. So it was never like we don't want to talk about it. It was never blocked off like that, but it was just like not openly talked about, if that makes sense. So becoming an adult, growing into myself, I was like, okay, this is also something that, women, kind of tread lightly on. So it's like, if I can be a face and, a sponsor of that, and sponsor in the sense of like just someone that people can watch and listen and learn from, like that's super important for me because it's like if I'm helping people in the health and wellness aspect, sexual relationships and sexual health is super important too. So it's like, why can't we shine more light on that? So to circle back to YouTube, my channel got demonetized because of sexual content, groping, and all of these things that I'm like, what? Like, that I was like beside myself. I'm like, here I am trying to, empower women and help them and shine light on an aspect of life that no one talks about. And then now with very little communication, YouTube is demonetizing me. And it's like, yes, well, I was monetized at the time and I was making money off the content that I was making. It was more so of the message, right? Like the supplemental income was nice, but that's not why I was doing it. I was doing it because I loved reviewing the product. I loved showing people these new things. I loved promoting sexual health and sexual education. And it's not like I was sitting there explaining people the nitty gritty of things. It's more of like to build confidence and like just to be comfortable in yourself in terms of like your sexual life. And it was like, it was so alarming to me that they were like, this is like too sexualized of content and there's groping and, excessive dancing. And I'm like, I'm reviewing clothes. Like I'm modeling off of a project or a product. Like that was not my intention whatsoever. So it was almost like heartbreaking too, because at the same time, almost simultaneously, as if it was like a malicious intent, I had hit 100K subscribers on YouTube.
Oh no.
So I hit 100K. I was waiting for my YouTube plaque to come in the mail, and I get this email, your channel's been demonetized. And I was like, interesting that it just so happens to be the same exact time that I'm taking this leap in my progression on YouTube. And the communication was very minimal. There wasn't any the customer service at the time, it was like, if you're confused, just read this section of our terms and service. And I'm like, okay, well, I read that. Why I made my content falls in line with terms of service, but what you're telling me I'm making my content for is not anything relative to what terms of service that I followed are. And I always made sure, like, if lingerie was sheer, I was wearing a sports bra underneath of it. If the bottoms were sheer, I was wearing underwear underneath of it. Like, I would always make sure, like, nothing was over sexualized, nothing was, showing too much attention to. So the intent of it and what I was being told were two different things. So like, that was so heartbreaking. And then I made that video, we got some more answers and, everything kind of fell back into place, but things like growth on my YouTube definitely hasn't been the same since, but I'm definitely just, I keep in the persistency with it and keep going because it's something that I'm passionate about. So I'm not going to stop it because someone told me to stop, but I definitely kind of tread lighter than normal. With it.
Yeah, after an experience like that too. I think the hardest part about that is like when your intentions are not seen by a governing body like that, it can make it just really sucks. You don't feel like validated in what you're doing on their platform because maybe there's like some sort of filtration system they're putting things through that's inconsiderate of what's really happening.
Yeah.
So then you're put in that position where you have to like stand up and fight for what you're creating. And you make a great point that sexuality and sexual health and sex life in general is not discussed very often among women. I mean, think of it like the number one lingerie brand in the world has the word secret in it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we're really are conditioned to not even discuss it among our peers generally. It is taboo. And I like how you related that to the fitness industry because bodybuilding is often considered taboo as well. So it's nice to be able to, I guess you could say, like, take up space in an area where most people are encouraged to shrink. So I think it's great that you're using it with that intention and that you've been able to benefit others by showing that. And also that you were able to explore that for yourself, because I imagine that came with a lot of inner growth and reflection to be able to be like, okay, I went from never really talking about it to now I'm going to show that I not just want to demonstrate what is the best product out here, but I also am admitting that I use it, or I'm admitting that this is something that I know about. And I think that that must have been a growth journey personally for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And too, like when all of that stuff kind of like, I don't want to use the term skyrocketed, but like
Mhm.
really like took the growth path is when it started becoming more prominent, when other people started to see it, when family members started to see it. Then family
Mm.
members were approaching like my parents or my sister, but no one would approach me. It was like, oh,
Oh, that's
do you see what Sammy's doing? And they're like, well, yeah. And then it was like I felt bad, but I was confident in what I was doing in the sense of like it put my parents in this like, awkward position of like people approaching them about what I'm doing. But I'm at the time 25, 26 years old, a grown adult. If you have an issue with it, approach me, ask me. I'm the one doing it. I know why I'm doing it. My parents don't know, like, not that they didn't know why I was doing it, but like, if you want the story, come to me, ask me. I'll explain
Mhm.
it to you. I'll lay it out. I will create a PowerPoint presentation for you if you'd like. Like, but it's like to go to someone else and, oh, I'm concerned. Well, why are you concerned? I'm happy. I'm healthy. I'm financially taken care of. My family's taken care of. Like, I'm okay. Like I'm not being forced to make this. I'm not trapped in a basement somewhere. Like someone's like, okay, record, action. Like, no, I'm starting the camera myself. I'm putting the clothes on. I'm ordering them. Like it's me doing it. So it's crazy. Like, and that's where that taboo comes back because it's like, yeah, the older generations, they don't do that. It is Victoria's Secret for a reason. It's hidden. It's a secret. No one talks about it. But it's like when someone comes out and starts vocalizing it, then everyone's like, what's happening? And it's like it's not that big of a deal. Like I know you do it, I do it. Just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? So it's definitely crazy like that transition there.
That's so wild too, how people, no matter what it is, will go anywhere but the source for information about what the source is doing. It's so
Yeah.
crazy to me. Like, oh yeah, your daughter's competing now. Like, don't you have a problem with her walking in a bikini on stage? And I remember my mom used to be like, no, I was an underwear model. Like, what? First of all, I don't care. And second of all, like, my daughter is happier doing this. She loves it. She's excited about it. I see her work every single day. So also, it's good if they go to a source that believes in you.
Yeah.
But and obviously that was my mom for me. But like I think it's so strange the behavior to or the tendency to go somewhere else and be like, oh, have you seen what they're doing? As though the intention with doing that is to get a rise out of someone instead of a true understanding. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's sad about it. Now, I think you saying that you choose to do this yourself. You're making the choice. You're the one who wanted to do this. Like that gives you a lot of confidence to be able to say, like, I'm open, whatever you want to ask me. Like you said, make that PowerPoint presentation. So I want to ask you, how does or how has creating this kind of content, because you make all sorts of content.
Mhm.
For those who are wondering what we're talking about, as a YouTuber, Sammy's not just making fitness and competing content, but yes, she's doing loungewear, lingerie try on hauls. She's doing cosplaying too. Like there is so much that you have to offer on your channel and other fashion and product reviews too. So I'm curious how doing things like that or also doing OnlyFans has impacted you positively as well as negatively, if at all.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely more of a positive than a negative. And it's really just the confidence, the growth, the self growth, the self realization. And that's kind of what ties into, competing because I've been doing that, all of that, that you just listed since the end of 2020. So I even started that almost a whole year before I even started competing. So I think just that was kind of the another big turning point for me of like I have the ability to do this. I have the ability to make a difference and make a change in not only other people but myself. So it's like if I can do this, if I can, film this, I can be on camera, I can post it on YouTube and be myself, I can allowed me to build this sense of confidence that I never had. Because again, that was also part of my transition into not being a people pleaser and putting myself first. I had the biggest lack of confidence because everything I was doing was for somebody else. So it's like the decisions that I was making weren't my own decisions, they were someone else's decisions. So to make that transition into like, you know what, I want to do this. Like I want to be the one to do this, to make this decision. It built a sense of confidence in myself and like, okay, I made this decision, I acted on it, and now this is the reward or the reaction that I get from it. And it was all positive. So it's like, okay, I can make a difference. I can influence someone into purchasing this item, or I can influence someone into building confidence themselves, or things like that. So I think it allowed me to grow as a person myself in terms of making decisions on my own, more, self-actualization and reflection, but also the confidence. And I think that was a huge thing for me because I feel like I struggled with that most of my life. Until the last few years, I've been very confident in who I am as a person, the things that I engage in or interact in, and the things that I do, the type of work that I do, stuff like that. And it's like I'm at a point in my life where no one can tell me, they can voice their opinion. Everybody has their opinion. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. They can express a concern to me. But if I know that my life's not in danger with what I'm doing, I'm okay. If my husband supports what I'm doing, we're both as a team, okay with where our life is at and what we're doing and what I'm doing, what he's doing, things like that, then we're okay. Like this is our circle. My family is supportive of me. If they have a concern, they express it. And if I can, give them an answer that puts their mind at ease, like, and a true answer, of course, like I would never feed them, a lie just to put their mind at ease. But if they're like, hey, we're concerned about this. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the reason, this is, the outcome, this is the plan. And they're like, okay, that makes sense. Or if anybody approaches me about anything that I do, it's like, I'm happy. I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for somebody else. No one else is forcing me to do this. So there, obviously in terms of the negative aspect, like comments have been made, people have said things, but it's because they don't know, right? They make an assumption, the negative comment is made, but there's no information or understanding backed by it. So I think it's definitely helped my confidence and helped me become the person I am today. So there's not a single thing that I regret doing because of where I'm at now.
That confidence is a big deal. If you have confidence in yourself to make a mindful choice and that means you feel really good about it, it will be difficult to regret it when you've thought through that. You walked us through that process already. So you've identified from start to finish what that could look like, and you've accepted what that looks like. And I think what's super fascinating about you too is you have established a presence in each of these different communities. I don't even want to edit one video, dude. Like, I don't even like that. So how do you maintain content creation for each of these niches?
Yeah, so I will say, and to be super transparent, it's something that I still work on to this day. Like being your own boss and being on your own time and having to create your own schedule is not a cakewalk. Like I thought leaving my 9 to 5 and working for myself that it is the best decision I've ever made, but I thought it was going to be easy. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be on my own time. Like this is going to be great. And I didn't realize how much structure I actually need in my life and my inability to provide that structure for myself. So, not to mention having ADD is just, just a wrench in everything. So I've been, really trying to like work through that and figure that out. I will say, so my husband has a background in IT. So he helps me more than I would like to admit with everything. So I'm super, super grateful for him on that. So he does a lot of my editing. He helps me with like my marketing aspect of things because he's dabbled in, a bunch of things, pretty much A to Z when it comes to like IT and business and things like that. So we're definitely a team when it comes to that. So like marketing aspect, he helps me on editing my YouTube videos, coming up with ideas. ideas, suggestions. So like, I'm one of those people where if I start to scroll, I get lost, but he can scroll, understand the message that's being portrayed, and then just continue. So he's like, hey, this is a big topic right now. Like, what are your thoughts on it? And if it's something that I'm like, you know what, I don't resonate with that, that's not for me. Or I'm like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And then, we kind of collectively come up with, the concept, and then I put my own thoughts in and make it my own. So that's kind of how the dynamic works. So I'm very, very grateful for that, because if I had to do this by myself, I would have, everything would be in flames.
Yeah, honestly, man, I am somewhat jealous of, and I say somewhat because I'm not genuinely jealous, but I'm like somewhat, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like jealous of people who have like an IT husband or someone who's really good at that kind of stuff, because I'm like, I'm trying to figure this out while running a business, while conducting interviews,
Yeah.
while working with clients. Wow. You know what I mean? So I think it's great that you have his support and that he's able to teach you and guide you through that as well, like guide your thought process, that is, especially when you're struggling maybe with the attention. Now, given you have so many different hobbies and interests, and maybe you don't have an answer to this, but do you have like a favorite thing to focus on or produce?
It's a great question. So it's funny. I have a favorite, but I always put it on the back burner because I love to cook. I love cooking.
Huh.
Ever since I was little, I wanted to be Rachel Ray. I would pretend like I would have, my cooking bowl in the kitchen. I would put random spices and dressings and oils and things. So that is definitely my favorite. However, I don't produce a lot of content doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm at this and it's so funny because my husband's going to laugh that I'm even talking about this. It's an ongoing conversation. He's like, if that's what you love, like, why aren't you doing it? And I'm like, I don't know, because I just focus on everything else. And I'm like, while I know that that's something that people want to see, because I know I watch it like every chance I get, it's like, why am I not doing it? So it's funny because it's a hobby of mine. It's a passion of mine, but it's like, why am I not creating content on it? Why am I filming my workouts? Why am I filming cosplay reviews and not filming meal prep? Why am I not filming new meal recipes? So it's like I let other things consume, and then it's almost like a self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Like I put my hobby in the back burner to do everything else. But like everything is a hobby, but it's like that one priority that stands out, I put on the back burner. So this is my accountability talk. So
there you go. I look forward to your next meal prep recipe then.
Yes.
I started making videos on TikTok that have mostly nothing to do with competing mental health and just strictly mental health, because I love it. And I found that it was gratified so much when I was working in a counseling center as a counselor, earning and doing my internship, that when I left, I was like, I crave the general mental health service and also even giving insight to other counselors. So my thing was, I don't need to post it on Instagram. I don't need to put, I generally am now posting on YouTube, but I didn't start with that. I was like, I'm just going to make random videos. Nobody follows me. Well, people follow me now, but at the time I was like, no one follows me on TikTok.
Yeah.
Let me just make this channel. And one of my good friends, she's a good friend who I've only ever spoke to online, but she's the one who encouraged that. And I think being able to have that outlet that's just like, yeah, even if you don't document it, but you're just doing it for yourself, having that outlet is so nice. Even if it is related to in some way what you're already doing with fitness too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was funny because like, it's always something that I go back to. So like when I'm in prep, obviously I can't eat, but I will make, like I did the most cooking I've ever done in my life on prep, when I couldn't eat any of the food. Like we got HelloFresh. I was making my HelloFresh meals. I was Googling recipes. I was making this, making that, and I couldn't eat a single thing. But I would give it to my husband, and I would stand there and I would just stare at him. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, take a bite. Like, how does it taste? Like, I can't taste it. So like, if it doesn't taste good, I need to know that it doesn't taste good. Or if it tastes amazing, I need to know that it tastes amazing. So it's definitely a go-to for me.
You're a feeder. Like you're one of those. Yeah.
My love language.
That's amazing. I have never been a feeder because I've always, well, not always, but I was generally told like, oh, your food's so bland. Because basically since high school, I've just made bodybuilding meals. But now like I like baking a lot. I don't bake as often as I'd like to, but I really like I don't like cooking like a stew, you know? Not exciting for me. Baking, like, oh, a cake recipe, like that would be awesome. Like that kind of stuff is cool to me. But what I am, really gathering from you is you went from this person who didn't give herself any time to focus on interests and hobbies to someone now with an extensive list of things that you enjoy and gain fulfillment from. And that is amazing that in that short period of time you were able to free yourself from the chains of people pleasing and never really giving yourself what you need to now total freedom and actually having more satisfying relationships as a result.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely something like you don't realize that you're going through it or you're doing it until you've made it to a certain point. And like obviously that point is not measurable. It's just that like self-growth point where you can like actually take a step back and you're like, wow, yeah, like a lot has changed. And sometimes I feel like as business owners or entrepreneurs or competitors even, a lot of people, even if you're not, you don't fall under any of those umbrellas, we don't really take a step back to like reflect on what we've done, like the growth that we've achieved, or like we don't think it's a big deal, but like when someone else, brings it to light, it's like, wow, that actually does sound a lot better than the way I make it sound in my head. Like, or like I didn't realize how far I came until I heard someone else say it. So I definitely feel like that's where it's important for people to put themselves in situations where like it's not bragging, but you're putting yourself around others that are like-minded that can acknowledge the growth and the journey that you've been on, to almost like repeat it back to you and be like, wow, you did this. Like you put in the work. Like, yeah, the last few years have been tough, or you went through this or you went through that. And like, yeah, maybe some of your days are hard, but in the grand scheme of it, like you've come such a long way. So it's definitely something that people need to put themselves in that position more for that self like actualization.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's something I enjoy so much about doing this podcast is I get to hear people's evolution in their words and in somewhat of a vulnerable setting where we're really just conversating and letting it flow. And it's amazing how much I learn from every single person. And I find that this industry is really great about holding up that mirror and being like, look at how awesome you are. Like you really did this. And it is a great thing. And I like how you're encouraging others to surround themselves with people who are able to show you that and encourage more of that. I wanted to also ask you one more thing about your life. This is something that was in your introduction, but we have yet to explore, and that is you doing more recently Toxic Angelz suit designing. How does that work, and what does that look like as far as? Well, I'll ask you that later. How does that look, first of all?
Yeah. So, to be like specific about it. So essentially, I started the position. So I help women in the industry create their suits for their competitions. So whether they have an inspiration that they saw online, they see Jennifer Dory and they're like, I want Jen Dory's suit. Or they're like, you know what, I want Jen Dory's suit, but I want to change this about it. Or, you know what, I just want to start from scratch. I saw this fabric that I really love and I want it to be this way or that way. And we can literally, I don't have anything here at my desk right now, but we have like a big roll of fabric swatches of all the fabrics that we have and a little box of crystals. So even just in the last 2 days, like I helped someone design their suit completely from scratch. And it was like the most fun like experience ever, because you can just be so creative. It's like and it also, when doing that, allows them to show themselves. So instead of like just picking a design that we have on the website that we designed and put up there, it's like, okay, I go for more deeper, darker tones, right? Okay, perfect. So let's do a dark fabric with some dark stones on it. And that's you. Like, you're creating this. You're bringing your energy to the stage based on the suit you're wearing. So it's so interesting and really fun to see just the different things that people, choose. And of course, as a suit stylist, like, we're the ones, or I'm the one that guides you on the fit, right? How it's going to fit you, what sizes to get, things like that. But when it comes to design and options like that, it's so cool to see just the different women, like the different personalities in the industry, and talking to girls that, are new or have been doing this for years. So it's really great. So you can do in-person fittings in Southern California or Northern California. And then we're at a bunch of the shows across the US. So we do in-person fittings at those shows as well. Or we do like a phone call or an Instagram like video call too.
So awesome. I had Margaret on earlier not this year, but in the last 365 days.
Yeah.
And it was awesome to hear her talk about these different ways of presenting yourself and why certain cuts are the way that they are. What I like about what you said, though, is you get to see the woman come out through the suit, really, and their creativity, because you're also well versed in what the judges are looking for. I imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine there might be times where you're like, that may not be the best fabric swatch or the best color. We could make it better with this. But
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you approach those types of situations.
Yeah, so it's more so in terms of like, if someone's like, oh, I'm stuck between this color and this color. And it's like, okay, then once they ask for the opinion of like, hey, should I go with this or this? And obviously I choose the one that looks best with their skin tones, their undertones, their hair color. There's nothing really, or at least I haven't come into contact with it yet, but like, the judges don't really have like we don't want to see this color or we don't want to see that color. It's more about just overall presentation. So that's what's
Right.
really nice about the industry too, that it's like the judges are never like, we don't want to see this color or we don't want to see this. It's more so, how does that color look on that person? Does it fit them? Does it suit them? Is their overall presentation, up to the standard, right? So it's really nice that, there's a color for everybody. There's never a time where I had to be like, no, you can't do that. So it's always like, I have blonde hair, so I'm going to do this color, or I have brown hair, I'm going to do this color, or, whatever it may be. There's obviously things that we try to steer away from. So like me having such bright red hair, a green suit wouldn't necessarily look right. It would look more costumey. So I will say that is the one time I've ever been told no for a suit color.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm sure other people have heard it in the industry, but I was like, oh, I really want to do a green suit. And I was told, no, you shouldn't do that. It's going to look too costumey on stage.
Why would it be with green too costumey?
Think of like poison ivy or like something like that.
Okay.
That was the explanation I was given. Obviously, I've never done it. One time I was going to do it and see what the judges say, when I'm in a position that it's like, whatever happens,
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to do it at least once to say I did it and actually see what my feedback is, to see if like it really matters. Like, and to like, with that being said, there is kind of a fine line. Like, if you have blonde hair, a lighter color suit isn't going to give you that contrast. So like there are certain things that it's like there are certain situations where it's like, hey, that's beautiful, but have you considered doing this because of this, right? So if someone has blonde hair and they're up on stage with a really dark tan and they have almost like a white colored suit, the contrast of it is going to look off. So that's very rare that someone tries to do that, but there's definitely some guiding. And obviously, as a suit stylist, most clients are like, I trust your judgment. Do you have any feedback, opinion, anything like that? So a lot of people are normally very open to that, but some people are just very set. They're like, I want this color. And I'm like, absolutely, go for it, girl. Like, do you.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying, it's your suit. I want you to be happy with what you're choosing, right? I'm not going to be, who am I to tell you no? Unless it's going to affect your presence on stage, and I know that for a fact, then yes, I will speak up to save you because you're spending all of this money. I'm not going to let you spend money and then be told that you need a new suit. So if it's deterring to your presentation on stage, then yes, we'll speak up. But if it's something that you want, then by all means, we want you to be happy.
The point you're making is that there's not a specific rule book that the judges wrote that says don't wear this. But when you look at the criteria and presentation and overall look is really heavily judged, you want to consider what's going to make you pop more than make you washed out or blend in some way. And so there's this important considerations, and obviously some competitors, I don't care. I want it to be this because I want to look like this. And that's totally fine to do that if that's what you want to do. And in some cases, it won't negatively affect your scoring anyways, because you're so confident and you rock it. But in other cases, I mean, there's going to be times, and I've been to shows where I'm like, she looks amazing, but she's kind of washed out with the suit, or it's not as good as what I think it could be. And I think that's where, as a suit stylist, you would have to be like open with someone like, this could happen. We're not deterring you from getting this, but keep it in mind.
Consider this. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if it's a new competitor. I remember when I first started, I was just like, I'm just buying a suit from whatever someone's worn. I don't care. I will buy it for $50 and I'm just going to see if I like this sport. But I wanted the color to be like teal because it's my favorite color. And I looked back, it was cute, but it wasn't really, I don't think, my color. So now I want to talk to you about color, because I think what's super cool is like color analysis stuff. And you mentioned that it's important to consider like skin tone and undertones, I believe you said. So how are you doing that, or how would you recommend someone figure out what their profile would be?
Yeah, so there's kind of like I don't want to say there's a standard, right? But like, what is really nice about our website is that every suit that we have, there is a photo of a girl wearing it. So if she's blonde and has a teal suit on, if I have a blonde client, I can say, well, look at her in teal, look at her in red, look at her in blue. So we have such a variety of athletes and competitors on our site that it's so nice that there's that reference. Unless someone has gotten that, color palette test done and they're like, I know that this color is good for me, then, that's a no-brainer, right? Or like, say, for every client, when they book a call, we have them send in recent check-in photos so that we can see their physique. And then we have them send in their height and bra size just so that we can measure them accordingly. What's really nice is sometimes if a girl has a colored posing suit or they put on a bikini of a specific color, then we're like, wow, like, what do you think of yourself in this royal blue bikini, right? Or, your posing suit. So that is a nice gauge of it. And then I also had a girl one time, she's like, oh, I don't really know what color I want. And then based on the posing suit she was wearing in her check-in photo that she sent me, I already kind of had an idea of what color I thought she should wear. And then she joined the call and she had a teal shirt on. And I was like, there it is. That is I was like, I was going to suggest that color and you're wearing it now. And now that was like the icing on the cake. Like, you need this suit. Like, that's just it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What I like is, as you said, there's a picture of every like different types of people in these suits. And then even taking it a step further, the posing suit thing, like Margaret and Angeline, who does my posing coaching, like they put their heads together and they're like, this is the color we think Celeste should wear as far as the fabric goes. And I thought that was so kind of them to take the time to do that for me. And every time I put it on for my like check-ins, even though I'm white, like I'm reflecting right now, girl. You see, I'm reflecting on you. So like,
that's why I wear long sleeves. I'm like, I'm so pale right now. I'm like, I can't.
Oh yeah, if I took this jacket on, you would be blind.
Translucent.
And I never realized how pale I was, because growing up, I was very like, naturally I would get tan very easily, but now that's not me. But I'm very pale. And when they gave me that suit, I was like, oh wow, like this, I've worn a purple suit, love my purple suit. Wore a blue suit, love my blue suit. This is like a nice combination of their indigo one, and it looks like it works well. Now I'm excited when we get to build it and do like the stones. Like I'm excited to see what they come up with. And that's a scenario where I'm like, I just trust you, like
Yeah.
whatever. Now, granted, if they're like, we're going to put like, I don't know, a yellow stone on here, I'd be like, that's probably not me.
Yeah.
Not because I don't like yellow, but because I don't like the combination. So that's where it makes sense, where it's like, okay, trust someone fully, but also remember your confidence matters. And I like how you said, try different posing suits. That's a great tip too. If you're going to invest in a suit, start with buying a posing suit in a fabric swatch that you're gravitating towards.
Yeah, 100%.
So last and final question that I ask everybody, what is your best advice for someone who has never competed before but would like to? And then your best advice for someone on their road to pro?
For someone who's never competed before, do your research and know why you're competing. Do your research in terms of what to expect, what the longevity is, what the rules and guidelines and regulations are, what the expectation is for you, in terms of what division you want to compete in. If you want to be a bikini competitor, what does that look like for you in prep, in off season? If you're a wellness competitor, what does that look like for you in prep, in off season, in the long term? If you want to do it long term, what does being a pro look like? What's, just everything A to Z. Definitely doing research, finding a coach that resonates with you, has the same ideologies and understandings as you, and kind of, I would say, not manages, but manages and communicates in a way that works best for you. Someone on the road to pro, I would say, this is going to sound contradicting. Don't put too much pressure on yourself for once you turn pro. I feel like when I turned pro, I had this crazy expectation that everything was going to change. And it was the same. And in a great way. Like I don't know what I expected to change, but I expected change. And I was like, well, I'm still me. My life is still my life. Shows are still shows. Who you're on stage with completely changes, right? Obviously, like the women that you used to look up to and idolize, and you still can 100%. You're next to them. You're one of them. So it's like you can still idolize them. They can still be someone that you look up to for inspiration. But I think I put a lot of pressure on myself once I turned pro, and like my pro debut, I went in and I was like so scared, and I was backstage, and I felt like I was at just another show. I like hyped up this process to be this crazy elaborate thing. And it was just, while it was my pro debut and it was very special, it was just another show. I was expecting there to be so much more pressure on me, or so much more expectation of myself. And everyone was like, oh, is this your first show? Have you been doing this? Like, they didn't know. Some of them knew it was my pro debut. Some of them didn't. There are so many pros in the industry, so many competitions in the industry, that there's probably more than, half of these pros that I've never even heard of before. And not to discredit them, but it's because we just have such a big industry. This is just such a big sport. The sport's growing immensely. People, turn pro every year. So it's like, you physically can't keep up with all of it. You know what I mean? So I would say enjoying the process of getting there, not trying to rush it too much, and then not putting too large of an expectation on yourself. And then also enjoying that process to your pro debut and things like that.
That's a great piece of advice and a great story to back that as well. And I appreciate you sharing how your expectations was different from reality, but it didn't take away from your experience and your reality, and how you were able to still enjoy it. And also your perspective that not everybody's going to know where you're at, and don't expect them to at all. I think no matter how long you're in this sport, I think people will always ask, oh, is this your first competition? Or are you just starting, especially if you're not at a show, it's very highly likely you'll be asked that. Don't take it personal that it reflects on your physique.
Yeah.
It's just hard to keep up, like you said. So now, how can people connect with you, follow you, find you to work with you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, my Instagram handle is it's Sammy Jo _. And then I have it's sammyjo.com. That's where my training, my blogs are that connect to my YouTube channel as well. On YouTube, it's SJXOXO. So that's pretty much everything. I have a podcast coming out soon, a solo podcast, which I'm really excited for. And that's going to kind of dabble into more of this sexual health conversations, things like that. So I'm really excited. But I also have my Bikini Things podcast with Laura Morche, which is amazing. She's been a great, mentor and inspiration for me. She's my posing coach. That's how kind of everything started. So we have Pretty Posing and Bikini Things as well.
Yeah, you guys are so awesome together. A great duo. And what is your upcoming podcast going to be called?
Taboo Taste.
Oh, okay. That is aligned with what we talked about. Well, when it goes live, let me know. Especially if it's before this episode goes out, I'll put it in the show notes. Otherwise, you guys just be on the lookout for that. Follow her so you don't miss it. I'll put all the links that you did mention in the show notes page. That's always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you guys are listening now, it'll be at the top of that page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section, which is alphabetized. You won't just find the links, but you're also going to find a complete summary of the episode, a bulleted list of the topics that we covered, as well as episode timestamps. So you can go back and listen to your favorite parts or share it with your friends, teammates, family. It always means so much to me as well as the athletes when you let us know what you thought, or you tag us after you listen, or you reach out. I can't tell you guys how many times I get messages from athletes saying like, oh, I'm getting such great feedback, or it feels so fulfilling. And it really just takes one person to be impacted to make all of this worth it. So definitely reach out, let us know what you thought. And of course, hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.